Let's talk a little about Christopher Hitchens. You know, it seems like there's some people in the world that you just can't criticize. You just can't criticize them because their fan bases are just so strong, and any sort of, challenge in any way is just like an instant dislike. If you are kind of in that category, you can go ahead and hit the dislike button right now. When it came to Christopher Hitchens, I was not a fan. I never really saw the content in his arguments. I never really saw the extraordinary intellectual power that he was always praised for. So, let's look at a few of them. The biggest thing that we can say about Hitchens is he wrote character assassination pieces. He was a character assassin. It's like a lot of what he wrote was just, trashing someone else's character. There are two big reasons for this that I hypothesize about why Christopher Hitchens would have done that. The first is people are more attracted to individuals than they are to ideas. It's like, the MSM talks about this a lot, about how they're propping up characters as opposed to talking about the issues. Like they try to find scandal in someone's personal behavior as opposed to discussing the issues themselves. People are more attracted to other people than they are to ideas. I also used to run kind of an entertainment website, and we used to collect the data, and you can see the stats, and people search for the names of people so much more frequently than they do for the names of ideas, or even things like movie genres and music genres. All of those things are way less popular than, the name of a famous person. So that's, I believe, is the first reason why Christopher Hitchens went down that road. The second reason is, what's Saul Alinsky's first rule for radicalism? What is it? To paraphrase, it's attack the individual because the individual is easier to break than the idea. Once again, paraphrasing, but that's essentially it. Going after a person as opposed to the ideas that they're expressing, because the person is easier to break. And that's Christopher Hitchens' career in a nutshell, really. When you look at the stuff that he wrote, character assassination pieces about Bill Clinton and Mother Teresa, Henry Kissinger, as well as some others. But it's like, where's the substance in that? And it's like, he, after writing, those type of character assassination pieces, he was just sort of thinking, who's the most famous person in the entire world? Actually, it's not even a person, it's God. So he wrote, God is Not Great, a character assassination piece about God. But, when we actually want to kind of find where the rubber meets the road and get a little more argumentative stuff going on, The Trial of Henry Kissinger, a very famous book by Christopher Hitchens, really what happened was he wrote 2 articles for Harper's Magazine that started to get some attention and some notoriety, so he expanded it into, somewhere like 98-page book, something like that, with no footnotes and citations, and most of that was just paraphrasing an earlier book by Seymour Hersh, The Price of Power, Kissinger in the Nixon White House. So it's not even an original idea. Moreover, they didn't even try to hide that, by the way. Seymour Hersh and Christopher Hitchens were both very open about that. Christopher Hitchens admitted it. And Seymour Hersh appeared in his documentary for the trial of Henry Kissinger. They weren't even trying to hide that. It's just, so that really wasn't anything profound or miraculous. Moreover, when Christopher Hitchens was asked, what is the one thing that you want out of this? And he said, some quality time alone with Henry Kissinger. And I was disgusted when I heard that. And I was just like, no, you don't want quality time alone with him. You wanted a trial. That's why you wrote this book, right? That should be the thing that you want. The first thing that comes out of your mouth is, you just want your exclusive interview so you can sell more books, so you can sell more magazine articles, and you can appear on more talk shows. He's all about himself. That's one of the biggest things that I noticed about Hitchens, is just that it's always this driving lust to propel himself into stardom, showmanship. We're talking about, getting his name up on the marquee as opposed to actually dealing with the ideas. And that quote that I mentioned is a perfect example of it. Let's look at Mother Teresa. Well, he really criticizes, some very, very obscure things from Mother Teresa. One of the things is he condemned her for putting a wreath on the grave of an Albanian dictator. And I was just like, who cares? Like, literally, who gives a flying fuck? It's like, what does that have to do with anything? I mean, I don't even care if she put a wreath on the grave of Adolf Hitler, I mean, which, no, that didn't happen, by the way, but it's just like, obviously that was just, a gesture of forgiveness or something like that, or, it's like something of that nature, to sort of use that as any sort of thing. Oh, look, she's a bad person. I mean, that's just kind of, kind of out of line or in the weeds or whatever you'd want to call it about that. And if you don't like that example, he was very critical of Mother Teresa for accepting money from the quote-unquote corrupt Haitian government. Now, when it comes to things of that nature, someone once said, you can spend Rupert Murdoch's money, you can spend Donald Trump's money, you can spend Vladimir Putin's money. Who really cares? If someone wants to give you money, you should accept it. If you don't accept it, then you're letting them hold on to it and use it for a cause that you don't agree with. Why don't you actually keep it and use it for something that you believe in? Why would you let them have it and use it for something that you don't believe in? How does that make any sense? So it's like, everybody should accept it. Once again, no matter who it is, no matter what kind of corrupt dictatorship is offering you money, you say yes. I mean, that is, once again, just something blowing things out of proportion, sensationalism, mind reading, trying to say that, you understand this person's complete thought process, and there might not be any sort of, kind of, ulterior motive that we just mentioned. And furthermore, every person should, accept money if it's being offered to you, as some sort of gift because of the reason that we mentioned. Otherwise, you're just giving it back to a corrupt entity to let them use it for their purpose. No, use it for your purpose. I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous criticism of somebody. Now, after those things, Christopher Hitchens was always somewhat famous. He published many, many books. Then he writes, God is Not Great. I really didn't find that book very original. I really didn't know what the big deal was. It sounded like a lot of just kind of paraphrasing of other arguments that were going on in the new wave of atheism. I mean, there were other books that were very similar. This is one of Hitchens' own fans, mind you. Someone on the internet wrote an invitation to people to check out Hitchens' work. He's like, 90% of the book is insulting people, but the other 10% is brilliant, insightful writing. That was one of his fans giving this, kind of invitation to other people to learn about Christopher Hitchens. That's what his invitation was. He's just like, 90% of his work is insulting someone, and then the other 10% is actually brilliant, insightful writing. Well, that kind of, sums up Hitchens and most of his career. He's just a loudmouth. He's just, some guy who knew how to manipulate people in large groups. He knew how to play into the natural anger of humanity, because humans are a very angry species. And he knew how to manipulate that to get people to buy his books and read his articles and put him on television shows. And, that's all it is. I mean, that's all his career was. Once again, and the way he did that was by using character assassination pieces, playing off of the human connection from person to person, and the rule of radicalism, where, it's like you're attacking the individuals as opposed to the ideas. So it's like, this guy isn't some sort of brilliant, insightful anything. It's just, he was a jerk, in other words, but, he knew how to play off of people's prejudices and kind of desire for, social inequality and hatred. And that's how he got to where he was. That's how he got such a huge audience. And that's how he got a fan base that kind of refuses to let go of their appreciation for his flimsy writing. I was listening to one of those TEDx talks, and they were talking about, Hitchens and his contrarian philosophy. What does it mean to be a contrarian? Well, Christopher Hitchens cited Rosa Parks, as an example of, someone who was a good contrarian because, she just kind of spearheaded things like prejudice and racism and, Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus. And yes, I do agree with that. That is definitely something I agree with, and that's a very good thing to say, right? And, this guy's praising him in the TEDx talk, and it's like, you don't get any credit for that. Why are you mentioning this at all? If somebody is opposed to Rosa Parks, there is something wrong with them. If they don't think that Rosa Parks is a good person, or you don't think that racism is bad, in the 21st century, you don't get any credit for that at all. Oh yeah, he said some nice things about Rosa Parks. He's the greatest writer I've ever heard. No. Once again, that's saying a very painfully obvious statement, just repackaging it in a way that makes himself look good. Notice that the person giving that TED Talk was talking about Christopher Hitchens first and Rosa Parks second. That's the whole game. He trashed people his whole career, and then he was like, well, who's the biggest person in the world that I can trash? Well, I guess it's God, even though God isn't exactly a person. So that's why he wrote God is Not Great. He knew he would be propelled to the top of the new wave of atheism, and he knew that he could manipulate people in large groups. That's what Christopher Hitchens and his career were all about. And I don't really mean to put something like this out as, pure trash talk. It's just kind of something that I've always felt, and it's kind of a criticism that I think needs to be said that no one else was really paying attention to. I mean, I really haven't heard any other kind of takedowns of Christopher Hitchens performed in the way that I just mentioned, but he didn't seem like anyone who was offering any sort of kind of brilliant, insightful anything. I mean, yes, he had a charismatic personality. Even I, found it interesting to listen to him talk sometimes. Yes, he despised Henry Kissinger, or Seymour Hersh at least did, and then Christopher Hitchens paraphrased his writing. But it's like, okay, you don't like Henry Kissinger? He was a terrible person. I guess I should say he is a terrible person. He outlived Hitchens, sadly. I definitely didn't want Christopher Hitchens to pass away the way he did. It sounded like rather miserable death, but it's like, I just didn't see the big deal about his career. What do you think? If you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below, and let's talk.